want to thank everybody for taking the time to come to the webinar today. Like I said, this will be recorded and it'll be shared for anybody who wasn't unable to attend today. So really quickly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the updates to the publishing workflow in the Spark data submission process. And really, just it's not a huge change, but it is a sort of a shift in the way we're thinking about how data is going to get published to the platform. So start off by saying that this was, so this, the update to this publishing workflow really is shifting towards what we're calling like a more peer-reviewed form of data publishing. And this was born out of discussions with the curation team and other members of the Spark Data Resource Center, or the DRC. And really, this was to solve two main needs in publishing the Spark data. So the first is that the published data needs to be reviewed and ultimately signed off by the PI or the lead investigator. And the published data needs to adhere to the curation guidelines that have been set and be reviewed, and also be reviewed and accepted by the curation team prior to publishing. So if you remember, the previous workflow was that once the data set would go through the curation process, and once that was done, the data set owner could just go and click and publish the data set directly. The issue with that is that there may be some changes that need to happen at the curation level, or there may be some final tweaks that need to be done. And if those things aren't completed before the data set is submitted, then it just creates a lot of work. So what we decided to do in our discussions with the curation team and others was to move towards this peer-reviewed data publishing. So I'll walk through very briefly just this workflow, and then we'll switch over to the demo. But just to give you an idea, is if we're starting up here with a curated data set. So you create your data set on Blackfynn, you upload all of your files, and then those files, that data set gets shared with the curation team, and it goes through the curation process. The way, as I mentioned before, the way it was done previously was that once it was through the curation process, the data set owner would go and just publish the data set. Now what we've done is we've switched that to now the data set owner goes in, reviews the curated data, and then submits the data for publication to a publication team. In this case, the publication team in the Spark Consortium organization is going to be the curation team. Once that data set gets submitted for publication, it gets locked. So no changes can be made until that data set has been reviewed. No further changes can be made until that data set is reviewed by the publisher team. So once the data set is submitted, it goes to the publishers. The publishers decide whether to accept or reject the data set for publication. If it is not accepted, the data set becomes unlocked, is moved to a rejected tab. The data set owner will be notified, and it will remain unpublished. And I'll walk through all of this in the demo. If the data set is accepted by the publisher, and I'm only going to walk through, the discover path here, because in a future state, we'll have an embargoed state and an embargoed space, excuse me, for private data sets. But for right now, we're just talking about data sets that are being made publicly available. If the publisher team does accept the data set for publication, it gets published to Blackfynn Discover. That data set becomes unlocked. All of the collaborators on that data set are notified, and now the data set is available on Blackfynn Discover, and then
Leonardo, Leo,
Sure.
real quick, so I didn't realize that if we click yes, that their data becomes public immediately?
Yes, for right now, that's the workflow. So this embargoed workflow is not yet done, but it's in under development at this point. But that's
okay. So
that's
we should never click yes at this point until the embargo date is, because I mean the NIH and the investigators say we will make this data public on such and such a date usually. Right. And so if they submit that for final review beforehand, and we hit yeah, this is good, then it just goes, okay, so this is good to know.
Yeah, so this, for right now, this publishing process is only for the Discover platform, or for making the data set publicly available. What we are working on, and what we'll do a follow-up webinar when it's complete, is this embargoed space here. So this pathway is not yet done. So right now we're only talking about this pathway, which is the pathway that is the only one that exists so far. So there are no real changes at this point to the publication process in terms of the publication target. Is that helpful?
No, I just thank you for explaining that. The big change is that, you know, we are actually the publishers as opposed to the investigators. So
Right.
That's the big change, which is,
yeah. So and I'll walk through that in a second, but just to follow up quickly. So what this new workflow supports is now we have a clear snapshot in time of when a data set is ready for publication, and it includes a sign off from the corresponding author, which is usually the PI of the lab. This allows publishers to accept and reject publication. This workflow is not totally available yet, but this workflow will allow the ability to publish under embargo, so that data set will remain private until the embargo date is reached, and then it will be pushed to the public space and the sparc portal. And then this also allows for the revisions of public data sets. So this is just a general overview of the workflow that we want to talk to. So now what I'll do is I'll switch over to what this actually looks like. So this is our test environment. So this is it'll probably, if you sign into the Spark Consortium org, it's going to look obviously very similar, but this is a different organization that we use for demoing. So you'll sign in, and as I mentioned at the start, the data submission process up until the publication point so far is unchanged. So the only change that we're talking about now, what I'm going to walk through, is once a data set is ready for publication to a public space, so like the Spark portal. So as I mentioned before, the way that was done, so for instance, if we go into a sample data set that we have here, you would upload your files, it would go through the curation pipeline, and once it was all ready to go, we can go through this. We have on the overview tab of a data set, the data set publishing checklist. So adding a subtitle, adding tags, a description, image contributors, reserving a DOI, adding a license, and linking the ORCID ID of the corresponding author. So once that data set publishing checklist is finalized, that means this data set is ready to be published. So previously, the way that would be done was the data set owner would navigate to the settings page, and it would scroll down here, and there would be a button here that would say publish to Blackfynn Discover. So now what this has done, this has changed. So now we created what you can click on here, this publish management page. So now there's a new page on your homepage, which is just for publishing. So I'm gonna break this up into two sections really quickly. So first is if you are submitting a data set for publication, and then I'll walk through if you are a publisher, what that workflow is like. They're very, very similar, but just to separate those out. So right now I'm signed in as myself, and I'm submitting a data set for publication. So I can see all of the data sets that I am part of in my organization, and I say, okay, I want to now submit one of my data sets for publication. So I navigate to this publishing management page. Once the checklist is gone through, I can click submit data set for review, and then I'll select the data set here. So it'll give you a drop down with all of the data sets that are available to be published. So if you haven't completed all of the items in that overview panel of a data set, it won't show up here. So only completed data sets will show up here. So once you select your data set, you'll click this checkbox saying that you understand that once you submit this data set for review by the publishers, that it will be locked and you won't be able to make any changes until that's done. So then you click submit. And you'll see that it'll move to this pending review section here. you'll see all of the data sets that you are a collaborator or a contributor on available here in these sections. So here, this data set is ready to be reviewed. Now, say I accidentally select the wrong data set and I want to withdraw that, we have that withdraw button here. So you can just click that and the request will be canceled. So we can add it back here quickly. So add that back. If you have already published a data set or data sets are available, you'll see all of the data sets, just like in pending review, you'll see all of the data sets that you are part of available here. And these are the ones that have been reviewed by the publishers and accepted for publication. Once you have a data set available or that is publicly available, say if you need to make changes or there's an error or something and you spot something that everybody missed in the review process and you want to remove it and fix it or make changes to your data set and then republish it, you can click remove. What this will do, if you click remove, is you send a request back to the publisher team with a request to remove that data set. Okay. And then the last section here is these are all of the data sets that have been rejected by the publication team. So this is a data set that was not created by me, so I can't do anything to it. This was a data set that I submitted and it was rejected. So you can always view the data sets in any of these tabs, but for a rejected data set, what you can also do is elect to resubmit that data set. And so you can do that by going here, and that'll move back to the pending review section here. So for this data set, if you're a data set owner and you need to submit a data set for publication, this is how you do it. At any point, you can also see who the publishers are, and that'll show you the publication team or the publishers team. And you can click that view publishers button in the upper right corner here. But all of that is pretty straightforward. So I'll just pause there for a second if there's any questions, and then I'll just quickly show what this looks like if you're a publisher.
Hey, Leo. What if my data set was rejected? Would I be able to tell why it was rejected?
Oh, that's a great question. So right now, the only way you'll be able to tell if your data set is rejected is you have to go to this publishing tab and click rejected. However, we do have back-end, like the infrastructure on the back end created for the rejection tab for basically for any activity in the publishing process to collect comments and notes. So right now, what we're working on for the next in the next sprint cycle is to find a way to surface that information to the data set owner. So right now, the only way you'll know that your data set was rejected is you'll get an email saying your data set was rejected, but you won't know necessarily why in the application itself. But we are working on a way to surface that so that you can go there and you'll be able to see comments from the publisher team to say, oh, please make these changes, and that, and then resubmit your data set. All right, so now I'm just going to switch to the publisher side of things, which is very similar. So now as the publisher, if I go into this publishing management page, this looks a little bit different. So here, you can only become a publisher if you're an owner or an administrator within the organization. So that's really not an issue for anybody in the Spark consortium, because the curation team will be publishers, and then we can always add people at that point. But just generally speaking, that's how this works. So if you're a publisher, you can also add publishers. So Anita, if you're technically a publisher in the Spark organization, if you need to add Gabby or somebody else in the curation team to that group, you can always do that by clicking Manage Publishers and add a user here. So here, for a publisher, the view is a little bit different. Instead of a view or withdraw or anything like that, you'll see publish or reject. So, and you'll also see the request type here. So this was a request to publish that data. the data set. So you can elect to reject it or publish it. So we'll say we publish this one. So what that does is now this data set is locked and it's publishing to the Discover. And once that is done, it'll move to the publish bucket. So it takes a little bit of time to do that, just because it's making copies of all the files and metadata in there. You also can see requests to unpublish. So this was a data set that was previously published and was requested by the data set owner to remove that data from the public space. So that request type is available here. So you can either elect to unpublish that. If you reject that, it will remain published. So we can say we'll unpublish this one. And then that will move back to just the private data set space. And say we'll reject this one. And that will move to the rejected space. So and one thing you'll notice is that publishers will always see the data sets that are available for review. They won't, however, necessarily see all the data sets that are published or rejected unless they are a collaborator or contributor on the data set. So it's just a little bit of a different view, but this is the basic process. So just to before I wrap up and just open it up for any more questions, this is all documented on the Blackfynn Help Center. This step-by-step process to go through this, and it has also been updated on the Spark portal documentation in the data submission steps. So if you have any questions, those both of those places are good to see how that works. And with that, I'll pause for now and open it up to if anyone has any sort of general questions about the changes to the workflow.
Hey, Leo, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Sue Tappan. Can you tell me how revisions are handled? Let's say somebody wants to, make a change to their data set. Do they have to unpublish it? And then
No. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Here, let me go back to sharing my screen. So for a revision, and this is also in the documentation, I'll walk through this. So if I want to submit a data set, one that's already published, so this is one of mine that's already published, and I want to make changes to it. So I'll go to that data set and I'm going to edit the data set. So you can only make revisions. So the revision process, and this is all in the documentation, the revision process, if you're updating any of the data set metadata, which is anything in the settings page here or on the overview page here. So if you're changing the subtitles or tag or the description or any of those things, but you're not changing any of the underlying files or any of the underlying scientific metadata, you can request to do a data set revision. So what that does is it will change the information that's on the currently available public data set, but it will keep the same DOI. So if there's like a typo in a contributor's name, or there's a typo in the description section and you just want to fix that, you don't have to pull it off and resubmit a new version of that data set with a new DOI. You'll be able to do that. So just to show you what that's like here, we'll change this to say morphine and click save. And now if we go back to that publishing tab, submit data set for review, you'll see now that this second checkbox is available because this is just the data set citation information that's been changed. So what this does is it will, like I said, it will update the public data set and maintain the DOI so that you don't have to create a new version control thing. So what you do is for those, you'll select both checkboxes and click submit, and it goes through, it's like a bug there. But that will go through the same publication review process.
Yeah, Leo, thanks. Just a quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a check to make sure that there is no change to, say, the scientific files or anything like that?
Yeah. So if you how does the platform know? I believe it does, but I'll make sure, I'll double check with our team to make sure. But I'm pretty sure that check is in place.
Just to follow up on Sue's question, what if you do need to change the files or the records?
So
How
if
does
you
that
do
work?
make a change to the files or the records, what you'll have to do is when you edit the data set, it's the same exact process. Like you'll go back to that data set,
Mhm.
you click view, you go to the data set, you can edit the data set. So this is currently being published. So, but what you'll do is you'll edit it, add whatever files and anything that you need to add, and then you'll go back to that publication management page and submit the data set for review again. And what will happen is this will be grayed out. It will create a new version with a new DOI for that data set. So it's version control if you make any changes to the underlying files or metadata.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate everyone taking the time. And like I said, this will be recorded. We'll make the recording available, and I'll send that link to a recording of the webinar along with the two documentation articles. So if you have any questions, you can do that. And if you have any other questions, you could just reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to help out. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.